Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a PortalCraft deck. This one is, I would say, more focused of course on Maisha being your finisher. She's the primary win condition for this deck, but of course Portal is one of those sort of decks where flooding can really be quite heavy. This is not focused on any particular pure artifact, pure puppet variant of the Maisha style deck. It's kind of a hybrid, which is actually fairly decent. It does an alright job. Of course, you can really go heavy on the artifacts with this deck as well if you want to, as you do have quite a few decent artifact generation cards and good ways to do so. So things like Dane actually become quite powerful, but for the most part, I've found that just flooding the board as much as possible, hitting the face, getting whatever in where you can, and setting up for those big Maisha plays is normally the way to go, unless you are out of options and have to use all your evos. Plus, the Shion is not a card that I have actually got to use, really, but it's definitely one that I can see the potential in with its, of course, artifact and non-artifact effect for 5, so definitely not a half bad card. So we're going to get right into this and check it out. So, kicking off the first match, we are up against Runecraft. I don't see quite as much Runecraft these days in rotation. Mysteria is still pretty decent, if not a little boring at this point, but is still, you know, cheap and reasonable if you are starting out, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what we come up against. Otherwise, you don't see a lot else going around. There's a few mecha rune decks, but honestly, they don't really hold their own in the top end of the meta, which is a little disappointing. Mechanization, usually favoring the 1-drops is the best way to go with things because, of course, Augmentation and, of course, Excel do a really good job with those really low-cost stuff, especially when they can, of course, be combined with the Maisha, which is great. So really, this deck does a really good job. So overall, you can flood with this deck, which is exactly what you want to be doing against Rune. Typically, being able to just dominate the board is really advantageous. So really, it's fairly good. So we're going to do fairly well with these. Being able to go with a big board is usually the idea. Going with the Displacer bot giving us the Acceleradium, even though we have overstocked our hand at this point, we have got enough artifacts to really make up that ground. And with the Techno Lord, we should be able to, of course, come through this pretty nicely. Now we just matter of really flooding the board again, which is all we can really do. Keep dominating that board space, making sure our opponent has nothing that can really come back to bite us. And then just using the core that they've got isn't too threatening. We do need a way to deal with this Flame Destroyer, even though we've got some okay cards. Don't really want to waste the Evo though, since of course Maisha is our primary win condition for this, so really don't want to waste that. Hopefully we can get some artifacts in that can do the job, especially now that the Zealot of Truth has hit the board. We're definitely going to need some good artifact flood going on here, even if it costs us a little bit to do. At least the Analyzings will do a nice job of picking off the big guy. And analyzing is one of the best lines of play. A little awkward. I did go for the Displacer bot, since it does draw us another artifact, which would guarantee the removal for this. I could have, of course, went for the Altar Plane Onslaught, but decided against doing that. And we can try and flood some more if we wanted, but I think holding on to the Mech Age, which is going to do the 8-drop play, will be much better. Repair mode, just going for that little bit of healing for our opponent. Not too much of a threat to us. Now things will get more interesting. So Mecha Gun Wielder, there we go. Prototype Warrior, it's okay. Being able to get the analyzing at least is half decent to remove this. And Warring Thunder will actually do this very nicely. Setting ourselves up very well, actually. Surprising. So going up against a Mecha Rune really isn't a big deal. This deck handles itself very well in these situations. Warring Thunder takes out big guys very easily for a one-on-one trade. And all I really need to do now is set up this junk for some extra Maisha damage and potential removal of wards, and that's really all I need. And we also threw the Acceleratium up just in case I do end up getting an artifact I can use. And since I already had the one free play point, why not? So we do need a way around the 6-6. Unfortunately, we don't really have a good way to do it without just losing everything. But we can do okay removing this. It'd be good to keep the bifurcating artifacts as well, which is really good.
That technology is remarkable.
Truce Adjudication, another problem card. It's not easy to get around that, unfortunately. So it's a little bit of a disadvantage. I honestly probably should have went for the Merciful there and just played it, but Onslaught was actually a really nice way to remove things, so I decided against it in the end. Because I believe Merciful would have gave us a +2/+2 on those, which would have made it much easier to remove and got some extra damage in and all the fun stuff. Yeah, so definitely should have went for that instead. But I do feel like we've bought ourselves enough time now that it's going to be hard for them to really get that final push of damage in. So seeing that concede, not as big a shock as you'd expect. For our next match though, we are up against Sword. Going second is a little rough in this Sword match. It's not the kind of match I want to be going up against. But, I mean, we have a good chance. So, mechanization, another way to start really well, of course, going for those really early 1-drops. We also have Prototype Warrior, which is actually a fairly decent turn 2 play. Now we have even more of them, so that's going to be pretty impressive. And really, all we have to do now is deal with their board, which isn't the easiest thing, but also at the same time isn't exactly the hardest thing. I mean, we've got a pretty good board ourselves, so it's just a matter of taking out whatever we can and making sure they don't get anything too crazy. Things like this Sky Saber here actually aren't a threat, which is good, since we do have, of course, Ancient Artifact, or just the Evos alone would do it, which I think is definitely the way to go. Use the Evo. Would be nice if these Prototype Warriors Evo effect was actually to gain an artifact similar to many other artifact-based cards. It would make it much better. Since then you could pretty much guarantee bifurcating artifacts, which are really good for their bodies. But that might be a little too overpowered, so who knows. This is going to be a little bit trickier. We do have to deal with these. I mean, we can deal with 2 out of 3, so that's going to look good. Well, actually, realistically, we can only deal with 1, since, of course, this guy's going to cost our whole turn. I blanked that we weren't going to have enough play points to really make use of this. Apostle of Usurpation, that's a little bit of a problem, since Gilded Goblet is, of course, going to do that. And now, it's going to be more interesting though, so we have to deal with this entire board as best we can. So, first things first, get the draw. See what we can get out of this. Junk is not actually that bad. I could definitely do worse. I would have preferred to not have to worry as much. Like, analyzing is going to be good here. We're going to be able to remove this guy. That's all good. Unfortunately, we didn't get another artifact, so a little disappointed there, but we've got another chance with the Displacer bot to really make up for it, and Master Swordsman does a really good widespread damage, even just as a one attack is really nice against sword. Like in this situation here, it's going to work out perfectly. And now what we really need to do is go face a little bit. So, they wasted the whole turn on Latham. That's really good for us, even though they are going to clear out 2 things here. If they're going to waste their whole turn, I'd much rather they wasted it like that. Not the best draw, but I mean, we can at least deal with this. Displace a bot for an artifact. Bifurcating, no good on its own. There's no point wasting the bifurcating artifact to just clear it out and get 1 extra damage. Definitely worth using the junk there. That was definitely the right move in my book. Celia Hope Strategist, so since they're going for board presence. And that's pretty much all they've got by the looks of it. They're really running low on cards. They're not going to be able to easily burst damage me down. If we can just remove this board and do it that way, we should be fine. We also have the World Gate, which is actually a really good play to refill the board. So all we really need to do now is go face. So if they do manage to somehow wipe most of this, we'll just play the World Gate, fill the board with artifacts, remove whatever we need to, and set ourselves up from there. And the real problem now is that we're the ones in the top deck situation, so that's not exactly a good place to be. So even though they have set themselves up pretty well, the draw there just ends the game immediately, honestly. That's got to be disappointing for them. They did extremely well getting to this point, but that top deck just really closed it out. Of course, I would have just flooded the board again, but still, that top deck just wins us that turn immediately. So I really enjoyed playing this deck, and it felt reasonably strong. I never really got to use Silver Beast, and I unfortunately didn't get to use Shion, which is a little sad, even though I probably would have had a chance to use her if I paid a little bit more attention to her effect. But Silver Beast being a one-off, I can definitely see where it comes in handy. Dane, even as its base removal, was really good. I found that he come in handy a lot against the blood and sword matchups in particular. And overall, this deck just performs really well. As long as you can always save that Evo for the Maisha, you really won't have much trouble. But at the same time, you do have Alpha Core, so you have at least one of these in your deck to recover. So that kind of can counterbalance a little bit, which is nice. So if you guys did enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe. Until next time, guys, see ya.